Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, Week 9, Monday Night Football edition. I am your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, it's a Monday. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, big game tonight. This starts the lovely primetime schedule we're going to have here in the NFL this week. Got a nice one across the pond, great Sunday night football, great Monday nighter tonight, and then again next week. Just a great card. Just a great card.
I mean, this may be the best one over the next, week or so. So we should cherish the opportunity to watch Zach Wilson try and move the football against the passing defense that leaves a lot to be desired. So we shouldn't count our chickens before they hatch. Should no doubt be a marquee game tonight between the Jets and Chargers. More on that contest later. But as we always do, we kind of kick things off with the good, the bad, and the ugly. However, before we even get there, a little recap of Sunday Night Football and the 24-18 win for the Cincinnati Bengals over the Buffalo Bills. Both teams come out like a house on fire, 14-7. Basically to start the second quarter, and the game settles into what some might define as a nice rhythm. I'm sure over-bettors felt otherwise, but we're reminded, Payne, yet again, why if you're an NFL organization in the year 2023, why you don't hire a defensive-minded head coach who thinks he can win games 17-14. The Bills' tempo that was so effective against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Thursday night when they were able to build a comfortable double-digit lead is something that gets thrown completely out the window, and for long stretches of this game, dare I say, the Bills look like an average football team with an above-average quarterback that they're hoping that can mask some of their deficiencies.
Our listeners have no idea, but we almost didn't show up today.
There was a good chance. There was a good chance that the podcast was going to be canceled for a mental health day.
Ooh. We had over 23.5 in the first half. And, after he bangs home the 55-yard field goal, after just numerous penalties there, and then they have to settle for the punt after the $60 million offensive tackle false starts there, and they decide to punt instead of attempt a 60-yard field goal. I was like, here we freaking go. That was going to be a tough one to swallow had we lost that. In general, I thought the game was... you saw the Bengals offense early execute extremely well, very much what we had seen the past 2 times, 5 quarters basically of football, where the Bengals are just moving the ball up and down the field. Joe Burrow's in a nice rhythm. T. Higgins looks like he's healthy again. Had a massive game for them. And then it kind of settles in. We talked a little bit off air. Burrow bangs his finger, and I think it looks much worse than it actually is. I don't know what the Bills are doing on offense. It just looks so weird possession to possession. When they go tempo and they're going 3 and 4 wide and Josh is kind of in this groove, it's like, oh, this is the offense. And then all of a sudden he throws the interception. The next possession comes back. It's run on first down, run on second down. And it just looks so out of form. It's just crazy how that offense morphs from possession to possession and can look so different. And then you have McDermott come out of the half and be like, hey, we need to be a little bit more balanced on both sides of the ball. His defense had given up 21 at that point. What do you think? His defense was pitching a shutout? What was he trying to insinuate?
He calls plays offensively like he thinks the defense is going to hold the opposition to field goals every series.
No, but it came off like, the defense is holding strong here. It's the offense that needs to pick up the slack. And sure enough, the offense does, and it would if you put him in, took the governor off him. But the idea that your defense was just out there humming and you gave up 21 in the first half was just so out of touch with reality. So it's kind of unfortunate to see the way the Bills are trending. Hopefully you have the get-right game against Denver, although that defense is trending a little bit better. They're off the bye. That won't be as easy as it looks on paper Monday night against Denver. But you look at that schedule down the stretch, and I think they...
Gonna have to earn it.
It would be there. Yeah, there you go. I didn't want to do the hot take and say, hey, Buffalo's going to miss the playoffs here. But that schedule... I think you said it right. They're going to have to earn it. There you go. There's the exclamation point. That's the period. That's the transitional to the next topic.
And honestly, buddy, I don't think it's a hot take at all. I mean, when you look at the updated odds to make the playoffs as of this morning, the Bills are a pick 'em to get into the postseason. And it's a team a lot of people thought could finally get over the hump, knowing some of the salary cap constraints and everything else going on with that roster. If they're going to get into the AFC mix, they're going to have to go out there and earn it every single week. Good, bad, and ugly. We may as well go to the London game. And I know we've harped on this unit, but I want to give them...
Germany.
You're right, Germany. Frankfurt's first time. Had no idea the stadium was covered. There was inclement weather. I got confused a little bit. Steve Smith got confused trying to figure out how long the flight was overseas. Chiefs defense, I feel like we're a broken record, Payne, but I have to give them their props when they earn them. Held the high-powered Dolphins offense below 300 yards and shut them out in the first half. The Dolphins hadn't been shut out in the first half of a game since week 2 of the 2021 season. The Dolphins, yes, they averaged 5 yards per play, but weren't able to sustain drives. Tua under 200 yards passing. And it was the Chiefs defense that gets the game-changing play late in that first half. It's 14-0, Miami driving with a chance to make it a one-score game, and it's the Chiefs finding a way to turn defense into offense, which proved to be the deciding factor because Kansas City offensively, yet again, underwhelmed, but it was a defense bailing them out.
So it was tough to find a lot of good this week. You're going game by game, you're combing the data, and it's like there was 9 backup quarterbacks that started. 7 of them were rookies. So there wasn't a ton of like good that was produced. So we're kind of sorting through some of it, and I think the Chiefs defense is really the best place to start. And this was like their toughest test of the season. You know, you start to look through the schedule a little bit, and you can like kind of pick at it a little bit, and this was it. And you hold the Dolphins to a 39% passing success rate. Finished the week 6th in EPA per pass allowed, and honestly, you know, relative to opponent, it was a far better effort. You know, some of the teams in front of the Chiefs defense in that category, look who they faced. It was like Clayton Tune and Tommy DeVito and Brett Rippon. You're starting to see the Chiefs defensive line take shape. The young kids in the secondary continue just getting better and growing each week. Trent McDuffie seems to make a game-changing play every damn week now. You know,
you called that when they drafted
him.
You said he was going to be a game changer in their defensive backfield, and he has exceeded expectations.
And then the linebacker group showed its depth with Nick Bolton out and Willie Gay playing through the injury. I still think you can run on the Chiefs, and the way their offense is playing, teams will be in a better game state to be able to run. The Dolphins got down 21-0, right? And they had to abandon it until the game got tight late. And you could see the Dolphins with Mostert really start to run the ball. But, you know, one of the best efforts all week was this Chiefs defensive performance. And there was chatter, right, about them getting in town a little bit later. And I think it was different for them. They mentally and strategically, the idea of them arriving late wasn't just, hey, we're gonna show up late. They actually employed a staff very similar to the Ravens, but that staff came up with a different idea based upon where they were coming from, which was, you know, the Midwest. And I mean, it seemed to pay dividends. They got out quick as opposed to the Dolphins, who had been out there since Monday.
Interesting game for sure. Dolphins, of course, had a chance to tie that contest late, squander the opportunity, and you need to see a little bit more out of this team offensively when they're pushed late in contests and the pressure's on. But the Dolphins will head into their bye week still in a very good spot, knowing that nobody in the AFC East, at least at the time of recording on Monday morning, had notched a victory over the weekend. So Buffalo loses, Miami maintains their lead in the division. We'll see if the Jets can get within striking distance should they be able to pull off an upset of the Chargers. The Baltimore Ravens, Payne, we watched them absolutely throttle the Seattle Seahawks offensively. Wasn't overwhelmed with what they did on that side of the ball, you know, down to down, but you look at the overall counting stats, and 515 yards later, 298 rushing yards and holding the ball for 40-04. It's hard not to be impressed. The Keaton Mitchell show took off in earnest as the Ravens found yet another running back to throw into the mix. You have 4 players that end the game with 40-plus rushing yards, including Keaton Mitchell, the undrafted rookie out of East Carolina, against what had been a very good Seahawks run defense. But the Ravens defense yet again becomes the common denominator, completely stymieing another team's offensive attack.
That's really funny how you phrased that. Didn't look great, but they put up over 500 yards.
I mean, I'm watching
Keaton
early in the
Mitchell.
game. I'm going, are they going to find separation? What's going on? They turn the ball over, and you're like, Seattle's going to go into the breakdown 14-10. And lo and behold, I'm looking, going, wait a second. They had 500 yards in that game? Okay, then.
Keaton Mitchell, if you're a college football guy, you know exactly who he is. And I'm shocked he went undrafted just based upon his skill set. We understand, he's not going to probably test overly well in the strength department. But he's one of those guys you can just get the ball to, and he can make a game-changing play. A lot of people were mocking him to the Chiefs in like the 5th round, and somehow he went undrafted. But I thought this was another statement game. The Ravens have had 2 in 3 weeks against the Lions and the Seahawks, and that is why the Ravens are the number 1 power-rated team in the NFL right now. And something we said on Thursday, the Seahawks have a ceiling with Geno Smith at quarterback, and it's going to prevent them from reaching that like core 7 power-rated teams in the league. And, we saw it again. Offensively, you think about some of the things that we've said over the years, right? Installing a new system, and that's what the Ravens were doing with Todd Monken. You can start to see it click in about that 8 to 10 week range. It kind of takes that long for everyone to get comfortable. And now Lamar has command of the Ravens offense. It was pretty balanced run and pass. Gus Bus had an explosive 2 rushing touchdowns. And then defensively, the Ravens are approaching full health on that side of the ball. Remember, the secondary was dinged up. Guys along the defensive line were dinged up to start the season. They're starting to trend very well in the health department on that side. And I thought that was maybe the best performance of the week. They completely stomped out the Seahawks ground game. I mean, I'm looking right now, 14% rushing success rate for Seattle. Allowed negative 0.54 EPA per rush. Geno Smith was terrible. 29% of his passes graded successful, 4th lowest EPA per dropback of the week. You start watching these AFC teams battle for home field advantage. It's going to be fun down the stretch because I think you start to think about some of those stadiums, right? Baltimore and then Kansas City. Like, no one's going to want to go into those buildings come playoff time. So the AFC down the stretch is going to be fun watching those teams battle for home field advantage throughout.
And you mentioned Geno's stat line. 50 of the 151 yards the Seahawks amassed against the Ravens came on one explosive play to DK Metcalf, his only catch on the afternoon. So clearly this Ravens defense trending in the right direction, and they'll have a massive game this week within the division against the Cleveland Browns before they'll play the Cincinnati Bengals. Win those 2 games, and suddenly the Ravens may have the AFC North on lockdown as we head towards Thanksgiving. When we look at rookie quarterbacks, Payne, you mentioned the number of them that got a start. One looked a lot better than the rest, and that, of course, was C.J. Stroud, 30 of 42, 470 yards, and 5 touchdowns, including a game-winning drive late. C.J. Stroud, apparently, if you read some of the comments after, said he wanted the ball. He was going to call. He said, "Call the plays. I'm going to make the plays." Baker Mayfield heaped praise on the rookie quarterback as well, saying C.J. Stroud doesn't look like a rookie. He's so impressive. Looks like a polished NFL quarterback, so hats off to him. He played extremely, extremely well today. And you see the relationship building with some of those young receivers for the Houston Texans, whether it's Nico Collins, whether it's Tank Dell. Houston's defense didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but C.J. Stroud's skill set was on full display.
Yeah, number 1 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation among quarterbacks with at least 15 dropbacks this week. And you think about the task, right? It's Todd Bowles with extra time to prepare. And these were difficult throws that Stroud was making. If you look, 11.3 intended air yards per attempt, the most of any quarterback this week. And so it wasn't like this dink and dunk part of the scheme and the system. It just felt like he was being aggressive, just throwing it accurately downfield. I watched this, and you look at some of the data over the last few weeks, and it's like, for me, it's time for Bobby Slowick to put the offense in C.J. Stroud's hands full time. And you start to think about Slowick, right, coming from the Kyle Shanahan system, and he wants to fire up the ground game. And we hadn't really seen the Texans' offense full throttle. We only got to see it because they were trailing. by double digits a couple times in that game. But you think about Houston going out there and 39 points without a kicker. Meanwhile, Slowick's trying to spam early down runs, and you look on early downs, the Texans are 22nd out of 26 offenses in EPA per rush. Early down throws, number 2. And I get that Singletary is a scheme fit with the outside zone, but he's not very good. And then Pierce didn't play this week, but he's not a scheme fit. The offensive line, when you look at who they are, there's a lot more Janes than Tarzans. It's like a group that's quicker and lighter on their feet, and they're good in pass protection. Trouble busting a grape in a fruit fight. So it's like you got to start molding the offense a little bit more to the player's strengths, and I think you'll see more explosive offensive efforts there out of the Texans if you go that route. You're never in a million years losing to the Carolina Panthers again if you're that aggressive, right? It's just not going to happen. You blew that game because of Slowick's play calling and want to get that ground game going.
Hey, you mentioned the fact that Texans did all this without a kicker. Shout out to Dario Bungawale, the running back from Wisconsin, becomes the first position player to make a field goal since Wes Welker more than 10-plus years ago, out there doing his part on kickoffs and a variety of other things to allow the Texans to get a 2-point win. Could have been a little bit different late in that contest, depending on what side of the number that you fell on. Any other good that you want to highlight before we get into our weekly nitpicking and bashing of what the Atlanta Falcons try and do disguised as NFL football?
Yeah, there's no reason to prevent us talking about the negatives now. Let's get into the shitstorm.
All right, the Atlanta Falcons, Payne. Josh Dobbs hadn't been in Minnesota long, but he may now get a statue of him built in front of U.S. Bank Stadium. Leads the Vikings to victory in one of the biggest battles that we saw in the betting market all week long. Once it was announced that the Vikings would be clearly without their starting quarterback, at Jaron Hall going to go, number gets out to 5.5, and it was significant one-way traffic even on game day coming in on the road underdog. It looked like it was going to fail to get there for stretches, but the Atlanta Falcons reminded us they're incapable of closing out games.
I think that was pretty well said. I was a little surprised because on Monday, we're like, hey, there's going to be a little early Atlanta money coming into the market. And I think on game day, if we get to 6.5, you're going to see some heavy Minnesota money. No one waited that long, because by the time we recorded on Thursday, it was back down to 4. And then to your point, we saw that close, soft 3.5 some places on game day morning. The trust fund, baby. Arthur Smith, he's really struggling. I mean, just managing the team as a whole, managing the game, offensive scheme, the design, the play calling, it just all leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, that game should have been over early. You think about that offensive performance and you go possession by possession. The first 5 for the Falcons, they managed to reach the Vikings 48, 34, 36, 24, and the 1-yard line. 9 offensive points on those 5 trips into Minnesota territory in the first half. You're up 8 still, late third quarter with the ball. And somehow within exactly 3 minutes of game action, you're down 3. Very next drive, 1st and 10 in Vikings territory, 0 points. Finally, you go on the long drive. You take a 4-point lead, 2 minutes to go. Defense can't get a stop on 4th and 7. I mean, how many times are you going to let a quarterback that's already been solved by the rest of the league for the last month roll out to his right? You just can't lose games with the ball up 8 at home to a third-string quarterback that joined the team days ago. It just can't happen. Against this schedule, I can confidently say, Atlanta's 6-3 with a competent head coach and play caller, and they are in control of the NFC South division. It's in their own hands at that point. Arthur Smith is just he's calling everybody else out. I mean, him and Kurt Warner got into a little bit of a spat leading up to the game this week. I mean, he just is so out of touch with reality, Arthur Smith.
It's definitely a tough football team to watch. There is no doubt about it. And you tell me Atlanta scores 28 points in a game where the total is in that 37.5, 38 range. That should not only be enough to cover the spread, it should definitely be enough to win that football game against the Minnesota Vikings, who suddenly, I guess to their credit, have now won 4 games in a row, find themselves at 5-4, and with a break here, a break there, may still have something to say about deciding the NFC North if the Lions should stub their toe in the upcoming weeks. We mentioned the Houston Texans and gave them credit for what they did offensively this week. The team that they probably should have beaten the week before in the Carolina Panthers goes out there and struggles mightily against the Indianapolis Colts. They took a ton of money from professional bettors. That number closed 1. At least if you don't count defensive touchdowns, the game was tied 13-13. Unfortunately for the Carolina Panthers, 2 pick sixes for Kenny Moore changed that game into a 20-7 to 13 outcome, and Carolina reminds us that they're a little limited with offensive playmakers and a young quarterback under center.
Yeah, Carolina was one of the sharper plays of the week, if you can believe it, from +3 down to 1, as you mentioned, and it wasn't just the 2 pick sixes. You got the zebra 4-point play there early on in that game. You're down 3-0. You're able to
what a
hold the
jump
Colts.
Call that was.
You're able to hold the Colts to another field goal. You're going to be down 6-0, and I have no idea how you expect defenders to tackle in this league anymore. And that might have been the worst call of the week. So,
the
it's
roughing,
not just
the roughing the
sixes.
passer in the Commanders-Patriots game was probably the only thing I saw that was worse.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think, Bryce Young certainly is not playing well. And then it gets magnified when C.J. Stroud goes out there and does what he just did. But it's all around. Like, we were the biggest forward-facing fans of Frank Reich when he landed in Indy. I mean, do you remember we were backing him all the time in tough spots, right? Playoff games, Phillip Rivers in Buffalo. Like, every professional bettor is just getting money into the Indianapolis Colts numerous times, like the first season or two. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, our tune had changed. About the last year and a half in Indy, we were selling Frank Reich, and I hated the hire to Carolina. But you're just looking, it's across the board, right in this very moment, right? Bryce Young isn't very good right now. The inconceivable. 2 pick sixes. I mean, the Colts secondary's bottom third of the league, and it's worse with their current injuries. Somehow, how do you give up 2 pick sixes? But it's not just Bryce Young. The offense is bad. The offensive minds are bad. The Panthers came out of their bye, right? And then they faced 2 defenses that were outside the top 20 in back-to-back weeks, and this is how it looks. The scheme is bad. Play calling's bad. O-line is bad. Weapons are bottom of the barrel. And then you add a rookie quarterback that's trying to tread water at the same time with all that going around him, and it's not a pretty situation.
What can we say is a redeeming quality of the Dallas Cowboys, Payne? Scored just 6 points after halftime against the Philadelphia Eagles after taking a 17-14 lead into the break. They took money in the second half market, opened as a 2.5-point underdog. That game closed at 2. End up with a significant total yards and yards per play edge over the Eagles, but they, of course, come up 1 yard short on a route that was cut off at the goal line. And then you watch the final series of the game. I get where you're trying to get the ball to CeeDee Lamb to make a defender miss, but trying to pick that up with the Eagles basically protecting the goal line makes things a little more difficult. Dak Prescott steps out of bounds when he had not a clear path, but an opportunity to make it a field goal game. And when you look at a second half drive summary for the Cowboys, a punt after gaining 32 yards, short on downs at the 15, gaining 71 yards, touchdown, short on downs at the 1 after gaining 45 yards, and then a fumble on the final series or whatever the hell you want to call it. The Eagles didn't go out there and impress me in any capacity, but they allowed the Cowboys to do what the Cowboys do best, screw things up in tight football games late.
It was so close. I legitimately thought we were going to see the corner turned. Dallas got out early, aggressive game plan. Dak was confident. He was feeling himself. The vibes were good. Then all of a sudden you find yourself down 11 with about 16 minutes to go. And then you battle back. You show the grit. You show the toughness. You get unlucky. Right. Then all of a sudden, you get stopped at the 2-inch yard line. Okay, no problem. Dak takes the next possession and gets 6. Picks up the 2-point conversion, but his cleat is a size too big, so he steps out. Okay, no problem. Driving again. It's 1st and 5 at the Eagles 6. You're getting at least 4 cracks at it. Maybe more. I honestly had never been more confident in Dak and McCarthy in that moment. I was like,
the joke was
play
on you,
calling
my
was
friend.
good.
You forgot who they were.
Yeah, the play calling was good. All the momentum is there. They like pan to the Eagles sidelines, and it's just like the faces are down. It's like, this is it. This is going to be the thing that turns the corner. That win would have changed everything. Sack, delay of game, throw short of the end zone on the final play, and the Cowboys cowboyed again. That was a great game by Dak. I mean, you just look at the numbers, 60% passing success rate, fourth best EPA plus completion percentage over expectation of the week. He was moving the ball down the field. It was an aggressive game plan, right? Both in scheme, style, game flow. Like, they were doing everything they should have been doing. Dallas outgained the Eagles by roughly 1 yard per play. Held Hurts and the Eagles offense to under 300 yards. Put up more than 400 yards of offense as a 3-point underdog on the road. And you just can't get over the hump. And I don't overreact to like singular data points, but that would have been the type of win, Todd, that made me completely change my opinion from just 1 week ago about the Cowboys ceiling, right? I was like, hey, just squeak over, get us to 10. These guys don't have a prayer. You win that game, and I can't even imagine the confidence in that building. Like, that was the one where Dak and McCarthy together could have saw the ball go through the hoop, and I just think it would have put a jolt of confidence into their systems, and Dallas would have been a very tough out down the stretch had they won that game.
Did you watch the 1st and 5 that they had on the 6-yard line before Smith gets called for a false start? Did you see what the Cowboys had called, though, as far as their play?
The QB sneak.
Yeah, the QB sneak with 27 seconds to go. Have we not learned our lesson from the San Francisco 49ers game? That thing was going to get stacked up faster than anything else, and the Cowboys would have been scrambling to spike the ball, and maybe they get 1 to 2 more plays max. Have they not learned their lesson? I get using Dak's legs because it's an element that the Eagles hadn't always accounted for, but that quarterback sneak was going absolutely nowhere. And in that moment, Payne, I went, you know what? Maybe this is the first time you get a false start, and it's actually a blessing in disguise because the Cowboys can come to their senses, backing them up 5 yards, creating a 1st and 10 at the 11-yard line with 27 seconds to go instead.
Do you remember one of the things I said last Thursday?
You say a lot of things.
About this game, about the Dallas Cowboys offense, about Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy. They don't know the when, why, and where. They understand the analytics now. And one of the things that they have been pounded into the back of their head, you want to start running Dak in goal line situations. You want to start running Dak in the red zone. But they don't know the when, the why, and the where. And so that was what you got there. They know it's efficient. They just don't know why they're calling it. And thankfully, I mean, not thankfully, right? Because it was a penalty. But it's tough. It was tough to watch.
It's a challenge. Any other bad you have that you want to highlight before we get to go into a team that won, but there was nothing pretty about it, and so they qualified as an ugly for me?
No, let's go to the ugly. I know there's one there that you're chomping at the bit to talk about, and then I have one that is a little bit under the radar that people might not be expecting.
Oh, I can't shovel dirt on this team fast enough. And I know they won. At least when you look at the scoreboard, it looked to be a dominant victory. At home, you finally break a losing streak. You do so against the mighty Rippin family with a 20-3 performance from the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay had been outscored 73-9 in the first half of their past 5 games, but they led this one with a robust margin, Payne 7-3 at the break, and could have been up more if they hadn't wasted opportunities with penalties. Yet I'll call what the Rams were yesterday, a glorified JV football team. I mean, Aaron Jones sees an increased workload, finally gets things going, but the Packers fumble the ball away in each of their first 2 second-half series. The Rams, of course, because their own ineptitude, failed to capitalize each time. And then Jordan Love with the quote that I loved, "It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but I think just the position we were able to put ourselves in and come out with a win, it definitely is going to help us. We just got to keep stacking going forward." I got news for Jordan Love, buddy. I'm not sure there was much to stack in that particular spot when you beat the Rams 20-3. It may have looked good on the scoreboard, but I did not see a single redeeming quality in Green Bay in that performance.
Yeah, it's probably going to go the way of a Jenga game. Just keep stacking, and it's going to just fall. The Packers aren't very good. I think we all got far too cute with futures, and that is not going to work out overly well unless something miraculous happens. I start to think about this, and I found like an old tweet where when Matt LaFleur was hired, I couldn't figure out why. Like, he was operating the 22nd ranked Titans offense at that time. And I hated the hire. And then Rodgers propped him up, made me look like a bumbling idiot for having that thought about him. But now, kind of years later, you're seeing what Matt LaFleur is. And in this week specifically, I mean, why was it so hard? It should have been so much easier against the Rams and Brett Rippon, a guy who had been benched at Boise State. Somehow, after like back-to-back fumbles in the third quarter, and you're only up 7-3, I'm thinking, like, here we go again. Not because we think we have a shot at the Packers win total, but because we need the Rams win total to keep trending the way it is. And now I get it. Like, the Packers got home, took sharp money. We mentioned that was going to be the case on Monday when we talked about the look-ahead line there. I will say, to Jordan Love's point, within that disaster, there was some good. Right? I mean, it was Jordan Love's best game of his career. I thought. Number 3 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation among qualifying quarterbacks. It was in some inclement weather. We saw, his receiver go down with multiple body injuries. But Christian Watson, did you see this? He's gonna be out for the game. It was like head, neck, back, thighs. It was like, what the I mean, I've never seen someone so injured before. Aaron Jones looked healthy. Defense played with some fight after trading away Douglas at the deadline. You thought maybe, hey, we're sellers. That might have an impact on the philosophy and the mentality of some of those defensive players. Jair Alexander was fantastic. Removed Cooper Kupp from the game basically, but it's not a good football team. But I thought I'm not as down on that performance as you were, but to your point, it's looking shaky there, right? With the back-to-back fumbles in the third quarter.
What a game that they have coming up this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What a game that everyone will be locked into to see two iconic franchises try not to pee down their leg and figure out who can go out there and execute for 4 full quarters. All right, what'd you have for an ugly under the radar for us?
The Browns offense. I know you and I talked a little bit off air, but it's rare to see a team win by nearly 4 touchdowns in the ugly category. But I think this is the worst offense Kevin Stefanski's had by a long mile in Cleveland. Watson didn't look good again. And then you start to comb through the data. There's 26 offenses that have played so far this week. The Browns are 24th in success rate at 30%. Ground game that's been so dominant over the years. It is just not the case without Chubb, and now you see the left tackle. Jedrick Wills leaving an air cast on his leg. My guess is he's going to be out for the year, right? And then Deshaun Watson, to me, just has to get this thing figured out, or all of the defensive improvement is going to be wasted by the Browns. I don't know what's going on offensively. There feels like there's far better parts here to be this bad, but then you kind of take a step away, and it's, maybe Amari Cooper's lost a step, and, the offensive line isn't as good, and you don't have that complimentary ground game, and Deshaun Watson's still kind of he's playing like a well below average quarterback. And so when you think about it from that perspective, maybe this is what the Browns are offensively.
I mean,
it was ugly.
Yeah, I mean, I know what the final score says. It wasn't nearly that good a performance from that team offensively. It had as much to do about the Browns completely stymieing anything Arizona wanted to do, holding the Cardinals to sub 60 yards, getting after Clayton Tune 7 times, making for a very rough landing spot for the rookie quarterback out of Houston to make his NFL debut. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there for all things Bet the Board. You can follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. Real quick on some of the look-ahead line adjustments, Payne. Thursday night, the Bears will play host to the Carolina Panthers. It would behoove the Bears to win this game, not only in the win column, but to continue to keep Carolina down, knowing that they have the Panthers' first-round draft pick in the 2024 draft. Bears were a 1.5-point favorite, now out to 3.5. Speculation that Justin Fields could return from that thumb injury as well.
There you go. Speculation that Justin Fields could return from that thumb injury. He's going to wear a glove, is what I am being told. So, yeah, that is part of it. Montez Sweat into the fold. Looked like he had an impact on the defense. You think about Carolina and what we just discussed. Having trouble throwing the ball, having trouble pass protecting, having trouble with their receivers getting open. Quietly, this Bears defense, top 3, stopping the run. And so, what's the path? You also look at the Bears yesterday. Deserved a little bit better, no?
Sure did. I mean, they outgained the New Orleans Saints.
-5 in turnovers.
And still had chances. They just can't really find themselves in a negative game script, unfortunately, with the limited capabilities of Tyson Bagent. No knock on him. He's going to be a backup quarterback in the league potentially going forward for the way he commands an offense, but he's not the kind of player that's going to be able to march you down the field in the 2-minute drill and erase a late deficit in known passing situations.
Yeah. I mean, you go on the road, you cover a spread, and you were -5 in turnovers. So
pretty hard to do.
Thought that was a pretty impressive performance by the Bears. It feels like they're starting to get a little bit better on both sides of the ball quietly. Now they're not winning these games, right? You lose on national TV to the Chargers, and then you lose again last week to the Saints. And so, power ratings wise, perceptually, there isn't a lot to like, but you start to dig into some of the numbers, you're like, this team's playing a little bit better than some of these end results.
Through the key, the aforementioned Steelers-Packers showdown, the Steelers were a 3-point favorite on the look-ahead number, now out to a 3.5-point chalk amid speculation that the player you mentioned that dealt with 37 injuries in their win against the Rams may not be available and takes a key cog out of the passing game in Christian Watson.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't care about this game. It does not shock me that we've seen early Steeler money. I will say when we got to 4, at least at one spot, there was a little bit of a nibble back on the Packers. I don't know where we head from here, but the idea of laying points with the Steelers makes me a little bit sick. So, hey, they got there by the hook, right? They won by 4 the other day, the old Kenny Pickett final drive.
They did, about as efficient a market as you were going to see. An absolute battle in the game against the Titans, both side and total, and the Steelers end up winning by 4 with a game that falls 36 with a closing total in that 37 range. Cowboys were a massive favorite. They're now an even bigger favorite. 10-point chalk on the look ahead against the New York Giants. They're now out to 16.5. As we know, Tommy DeVito will make his first start unless the Giants are able to get Phil Simms back out there under center.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to sign someone.
I mean, they have to now. I don't even know who their 4th-string quarterback is.
Yeah, right. I just meant to start this game. It feels like it's Tommy DeVito, right? And that's what you're going to get because you have Tyrod on IR, and then obviously DJ looks like he's torn his knee up. So I don't know where this stops. And this is one of those games that becomes very difficult to handicap. It becomes pretty mechanical because it's one of those games with a large spread again this season where you have a have and you have a have not, and it can create some wonkiness in the data points. So it's like, how are you going to attack this game? What's the price that makes you say, hey, I want to back Tommy DeVito and the Giants, a guy that could not start at Syracuse, was forced to transfer out. That's your starting quarterback. I don't know.
It's a tough situation.
This is what it is. I mean, this is what you watched it last 2 weeks. I mean, I think we went into Monday's show last week and we referenced a certain quarterback or a certain team having the second lowest passing success rate, only ahead of Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants. And against the Jets, the Giants had a 7% passing success rate. I've never seen that before in my life. And then all of a sudden last week, I don't really want to get into the best bet last week, but if we got someone who can help us, dial up the projections for 2 pick sixes and a quarterback tearing his ACL in the second possession of the game, I'd love to have him on board the team.
He or she would be a valuable addition to our prognostications if that was the case in forecasting.
It's just fucking unbelievable. I don't know on this one. I'll just be kidding. But that's why the line's moved, because Tommy DeVito is not an NFL quarterback. Probably should not be on an NFL roster.
Nope.
He's going to be starting against Dallas.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
week.
So that's why. All right, that's enough look-ahead discussion. We do have a grocery list of injuries, and since Payne and I aren't smart enough to unpack them and explain to you what the lasting gambling and fantasy implications are for all of them, we bring in Dr. Deepak Chona, who you can follow on X at SportMDAnalysis, to break them all down.
Are you injured or are you hurt?
When injuries occur in the NFL, you need someone to call on.
If you're hurt, you can still play. If you're injured, you can't.
Let's check in with Dr. Deepak Chona, Stanford and Harvard trained orthopedic sports surgeon and founder of Sports Med Analytics, the industry leader in data-driven injury analysis.
So are you hurt or are you injured?
All right, guys, let's do it. Starting with the injuries that went down yesterday. And first, Jalen Hurts. The video was a little scary looking. It was a classic mechanism for an ACL, but luckily his foot was not planted, so he got saved there. Instead, I think he sprained his MCL and probably re-aggravated that bone bruise that was going on before. He did still, of course, continue to play. He wasn't rushing so explosively. But the good news is that these get better pretty quickly over the course of about 2 to 3 weeks. And now they're going on the bye, so I think you have Jalen Hurts looking a lot like his old self once they come back from the Week 10 bye. Then Dallas Goedert, a little less fortunate news here in the sense that they have a fracture there. And the fact that they're getting an MRI tells me it's probably not displaced and most likely doesn't need surgery. The downside, though, is that fractures take about 6 weeks to heal, and you can sometimes rush back the return to in the 4 to 5 range with a little bit of risk. So my suspicion is they put him on the IR, give him the bye plus the 4 weeks, and return him right after that. Then Daniel Jones. That certainly looks like an ACL. He stumbled back, and then the second time when he went out there, the knee kind of buckled on him. And that's a pretty classic mechanism. So if that's the case, then you're looking at probably week 1 of next year that he is ready, but out for the season. Then Christian Watson, he is in the concussion protocol. So in most cases, the data would say he misses 1 week and returns the following. Josh Downs played with a late week addition to the injury report with a knee sprain, and then came out of the game in the second half. It's a little unclear if he actually had a re-injury to this area or if he was just not feeling productive and like himself, healthy enough to play. So if it is a true re-injury, that would average about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, in the latter case, if it's just that he wasn't feeling healthy enough to play, then he would have a shot this week. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information on this one because you can't really tell if there was a specific injury from the game video. And Cam Akers, he unfortunately tore his opposite Achilles from the one he tore before. So Cam Akers can come back next year, but he's going to have a pretty big performance hit. It's really a brutal blow to his career. Jalen Waddle did take a hit to his knee, had an MCL sprain type of mechanism. Pretty mild, though. He was able to play, and then they have the bye, of course, coming up week 10. So week 11, he should be near 100%. KJ Osborne is in concussion protocol. So for that, again, 1 week out and then returning the following is the most common situation. And it's actually the same situation for Treylon Burks. The one scary part of Treylon Burks' injury was going to be his potential spine involvement, and that's why you saw them bring out the stretcher and everybody paused the game and he left in an ambulance. But the Treylon Burks situation was probably mostly a precaution. He was moving everything, which tells me his spinal cord is okay. And the key here now going forward is most likely just the concussion. Then Dameon Pierce. We don't have a clear diagnosis here on whether this is a high or a low ankle. High ankles average 2 to 3 weeks out, and Dameon Pierce didn't practice this whole last week. But if it's a low ankle, then he would have an excellent chance to return this week. So we'll sort of see when he returns to practice. If he returns on Wednesday, then we're suspecting low ankle and probably playing this week without much of a performance hit. Then Darren Waller. He is on the IR, as is his teammate Tyrod Taylor, who's now suddenly relevant with the Daniel Jones injury. So both of those guys should be able to return after their 4-week stint on the IR. In Waller's case, he's a high re-injury risk for the rest of the season, but most players are able to return 4 weeks after the hamstrings. And Tyrod Taylor, he has what is likely a rib fracture, and we see most players come back before 4 weeks, actually 3 weeks usually. So Tyrod Taylor being on the IR means he's very likely to return by that time. Deebo Samuel, coming out of now 3 weeks of rest, if you include the bye, he should be ready to go as we enter week 11. Non-displaced fracture, at this point, the pain, it improves a lot over the course of those 3 to 4 weeks. So I'm suspecting Deebo Samuel to look very much like himself. David Montgomery also likely returning now after the bye. He had a rib contusion, and when you have those injuries, they're very painful, but they usually average about 2 to 3 weeks, and he's going to have had 4 weeks to rest by the end of this coming week. So David Montgomery should be back to near full strength. I don't anticipate any workload limitations for him. And then a series of guys on the IR, none bigger than Justin Jefferson. We're hearing mixed reports out of Minnesota, and it's a little surprising to hear those because most players, especially young players, by 4 weeks out of the hamstring strains would be able to return. So we're suspecting that that's still the case for Justin Jefferson. We don't have any reports saying that's not the case, just that they're going to be cautious and slow and check him out before they do anything. So my suspicion is still Justin Jefferson gets tested and everything this week, returns to practice, and then most likely the data would favor him playing. When he does come back, the re-injury risk for his profile of player is about 10%. But there's not really any workload limitations or performance hit expected. The same goes of Devon Achane and James Conner. Both are out with knee sprains, likely MCL sprains, and these average 2 to 3 weeks. So both of them going on the IR is probably the team being a little on the conservative side. And in Achane's case, he should be back pretty much at full strength now. So they're going into the bye, and then he's eligible to return right after. So that's the expectation for Achane, and I don't think he'll have any limitations or performance hit. And James Conner is eligible to return this coming week. So James Conner is very likely in for that outcome. Kyren Williams is also on the IR, and he's eligible to return week 12. This one is a little more dicey in the sense that while most high ankles cause about a 3-week absence and 3 to 4 is relatively common still, Kyren Williams will have had 5 weeks of rest. However, when players return, initially they do average a performance hit up to about 20%. So Kyren Williams, I think he comes back week 12 when he's eligible, but there is usually a lingering impact. And we've heard Saquon Barkley talk about this, and we've seen a little bit of a performance and efficiency dip when Saquon and Austin Eckler first returned from these earlier this year. I think you'll see a little bit of the same from Kyren Williams. Then Ryan Tannehill, a little surprising that we're hearing Mike Vrabel talk about Tannehill as potentially the starter, given the way Levis has played and the team's situation overall. But Ryan Tannehill, average on high ankle is about 2 weeks if it's mild. And with Ryan Tannehill, the part we don't know is how conservative they want to be, because he did have surgery on this last year. And in the Tannehill situation, older players do tend to hustle back, especially when they're on that fringe of maybe losing their job for good. So with Ryan Tannehill, we expect him to try to play this coming week. He's a pocket QB, so we don't anticipate huge performance limitations if he's out there, but he isn't always going to be able to last the whole week of practice in this situation. Then Minkah Fitzpatrick, the average severe hamstring or moderate hamstring takes about 3 weeks to recover. So Minkah Fitzpatrick playing this coming week would be a huge outlier. We would suspect week 11 or 12 is very much realistic. Then Matthew Stafford, of course, missed yesterday's game. He should be ready to go week 11 after the bye. Kyler Murray is likely already ready to go, but they, of course, sat him out. I suspect he plays this coming week. Keep in mind that quarterbacks coming off of ACLs don't see much of a production hit to their passing. However, they see efficiency and number of carries both go down for rushing. So we would expect to see a more stationary Kyler Murray, at least to start. Then Justin Fields. Now, this one we've been tracking for a while. It does look like he's trending towards return for week 10. They are on Thursday, which doesn't really help things. But from the standpoint of him, what he needs to do to be ready, he, number one, is grip the ball strong to throw it. And it looks like he can already do that. And then the second phase of that is really getting him able to take a hit. That is always going to be a little dicey with this type of injury. So with Justin Fields, we would expect him back this coming week. And again, if he's out there, we're not expecting a huge performance hit. The re-injury risk is going to exist, and it's going to be a little concerning, but that's one of the risks you got to take when you're playing for your job, as Justin Fields is. Then Drake London, most groin strains aren't going to cause young players to miss multiple weeks. So we would anticipate, based on the data, that Drake London returns this coming week. And finally, Aaron Jones, not injured, but coming off of an injury. Week 9 looked like his first full workload post hamstring. And that's pretty common. Usually when older running backs come back from a re-aggravated in-season hamstring, it means they will have a workload dip for the first couple of weeks. And that's very much what we saw with Aaron Jones. It does look to me like he is on track to be back at near full strength for the rest of the season. There is about a 15% re-injury risk for him, but if he avoids that outcome, should be a solid player the rest of the year. And that's all I got for now, so I'll kick it back over.
I mean, Payne, there were a lot of injuries there that Deepak highlighted, but at least some level of optimism. And Deepak going so deep to get in an IR, trying to figure out timelines in terms of when some of these players may or may not return to action. So have to go back, listen again. But whether it's Jalen Hurts coming into the bye, a chance to heal up a little, Dallas Goedert going to miss some time, Daniel Jones ACL that we mentioned. The list goes on and on with a number of potential role players and offensive contributors missing because of concussions.
Every single week relative to last year, the injury reports keep getting longer and longer. It's a complete mash unit this year, it feels like. And again, what we said at the top of the show, 9 backup quarterbacks started this week. This is one of the more funky seasons I have ever been a part of in the NFL.
It has been a challenging nut to crack and figure out which data points you can lean on, which ones are completely irrelevant. There is no doubt about it. And that's, ridiculous to say, but here we are almost on the cusp of completing week 9. And I'm not sure I have a firm grasp on who some of these teams are in the middle tiers outside of the truly elite and the truly horrific on the top and bottom. Speaking of which, Payne, one final game on the docket for Monday Night Football.
2 middling teams today. Yeah, let's figure it out.
That's what I was going to say. One team who with a win tonight can put themselves, but both of them, I guess, put them both back squarely in the AFC playoff picture, the Chargers and Jets. It's the Chargers flying across the country now as 3.5-point favorites. This number opens substantially shorter than that, in that 1.5 range. Total on the game sits at 40, and it's been a little bit of a battle in terms of the full game total. We got as low as 39.5 early this morning and yesterday. Now seeing a little bit of over money hit the market. And when we look at the Jets, they come into this fresh off a 13-10 overtime win against the Giants, a contest that we highlighted on Monday. Had 24 total punts, most in any NFL game since 1998. Meanwhile, the Jets have won 3 straight games since starting 1-3, but unfortunately for the Jets, they've trailed in the second half of each of them, and they've trailed in the second half of all 4 wins this season. The Jets have led for a grand total of 57 minutes and 53 seconds this season, the second fewest by any team with a winning record through 7 games, going all the way back to 2000. The only other team to be close to this range would be the 2017 Dolphins. Meanwhile, the Chargers, they enter off their most dominating performance of the year, 30-13 win against Chicago, having lost their previous 2 games against the Cowboys and the Kansas City Chiefs. But before we're ready to anoint the Chargers as officially being back, 2 of their 3 wins this year have come against backup rookie quarterbacks in Aiden O'Connell and Tyson Bagent. This Chargers offense, Payne, they haven't exactly been great when you look at the adjustments they make at the break coming out in the second half. Their ground game has lacked a lot of punch. They were able to get Austin Eckler on track more as a receiver against the Bears than anything else. We know what Keenan Allen provides, and from Charger country this week, Quentin Johnston apparently ready to take the next step in his development, with Josh Palmer expected to miss or being ruled out with the knee injury. When you look at this Chargers offense matched up against the Jets defense, what's the path for Justin Herbert and company?
I mean, it starts up front. And the Chargers did a much better job protecting Justin Herbert last week on the field and then within the scheme. And the Bears don't get much pressure in general. Then Kelton Moore kind of went with the quick, short pass game, and Herbert was only under pressure on 19% of dropbacks. The catch-22 with that plan is, the offense started to look a little bit like it did last season. And Justin Herbert had the very lowest completed air yards of any quarterback in Week 8 at 2.9. So it's like, okay, we helped the pressure situation. We're going to help our quarterback not get hit every single time he drops back, but now it's going to kind of put a governor on the offense and kind of hinder some of the explosiveness. I think it's a much tougher task trying to protect Herbert this week against a Jets defense that's top 5 in pressure rate. And then you think about the one-on-one matchups along the line, right? Quinnen Williams in the middle of the Jets defense going up against a backup center, and it's possible, Justin Herbert's going to see some pressure in his face at times. This very much feels like an Austin Eckler game. And I'm sure Kellen Moore is going to try to hand him the ball a couple times, but I think Eckler is more involved in the passing game, especially with, Joshua Palmer out. What's interesting, though, is like if you look at the Jets defense, you look at the individual players. You have C.J. Mosley, you have Quincy Williams. They have been fantastic in coverage this season. Number 2 and number 3 in coverage grade through 8 weeks among 88 qualifying linebackers. Then you look at the actual data. And the Jets allow 7.2 yards per pass attempt to running backs. 31% of the receptions allowed are caught by running backs. It's far and away the highest rate in the NFL. Teams are certainly having problems throwing outside on Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, so they're forced to throw short. They're forced to throw over the middle. They're forced to throw to their backs. This, to me, is a side of the ball that dictates the game flow, right? Because if you look at the Chargers, their offense has been very good early in games. I think you hinted at some issues after the break. But if you look in the first half, number 2 in first half EPA per play, 38% of first half drives have resulted in a touchdown for the Chargers. That's also number 2. This is a step up in class, though, for me. Just when I kind of look at these two teams. I know the Chargers' strength of schedule on offense looks a little bit better because you have Minnesota and the Dolphins trending in the right direction. But at the time of those games, that was not that type of defense in that moment. And so I think they're getting credited for a little bit tougher of a schedule than what they've actually faced. The Jets are stepping up a little bit defensively when we had some questions there to how they were performing through the first 4 or 5 weeks. This is certainly going to be a much tougher test because, the Chargers have played what we have as 2 top 10 defenses. And you look at those specific games, the Chargers offense finished 26th in success rate against the Cowboys defense out of 30 offenses that played in Week 6. And then 26 teams played in Week 7. And the Chargers were 22nd in success rate against the Chiefs defense. So, the 2 toughest tests, 2 defenses that kind of mirror the Jets, there hasn't been a ton of offensive output down to down for the Chargers. And now, again, like you're down, we know Mike Williams, obviously, Joshua Palmer now. Like, where does the explosiveness come from? It'll be interesting to see, though, the matchup, like game within the game, what Robert Saleh decides to do with Keenan Allen. Usually he's keeping Sauce Gardner and Reed outside. The majority of Keenan Allen snaps come in the slot. So to me, like, as I think about this, it would be very weird to let Keenan Allen beat you in the middle because you chose not to adjust your defense to opponent. So I don't know exactly what Robert Saleh is going to do with Keenan Allen, but if you can somehow say, hey, like, we're going to have Sauce travel, and you stick him on Keenan, Like, where are the Chargers going here?
The amount of disrespect you're putting on their normal slot corner and Michael Carter, Payne, is a little bit hurtful, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the path is if Keenan Allen isn't operating tonight. It does look like the tight end group gets a little bit healthier. There's been some discussion of having, Donald Parham a little bit more in the mix and going with some 2 tight end sets. But, yeah, I mean, you got to be able to stop the screen game if you're the Jets. I mean, Austin Eckler is kind of the threat there. So, but there aren't a ton of options here. I think we talked about this, right? Like the Chargers offense, when you think about it, it's like, oh my God, we have Kellen Moore calling plays now, and we're going to be a little bit more versatile and bomb the ball deep, and we have Justin Herbert, and Keenan Allen's awesome, but you start to think about these players, there isn't much explosiveness to be had here out of this offense.
No, significantly more methodical, and we'll see if Quentin Johnson can be that deep threat here in the game today if they throw him a couple of deep balls. Should he be isolated in man coverage on the outside against that talented tandem of outside cover corners for the Jets? Now, on the other side of the ball, when we look at the Jets offensively, we talked about how few minutes they've actually led games for this year. Well, they've only run 46 offensive plays while leading this season. The fewest offensive touchdowns, 8 by a team above 500 through 7 games since the 2007 Ravens. When you look at the Jets during their modest winning streak, 3 offensive touchdowns is the fewest in a 3-game win streak since the Vikings in 2016. 18% success rate on third down offense on a 3-game win streak is the lowest rate since the 2006 Panthers, and a red zone offense converting at a 9% clip is the lowest on a 3-game win streak since the 2015 Texans. Zach Wilson had 2 big pass plays against the Giants when he needed them most last week, but otherwise did not exactly overwhelm by any stretch of the imagination. He's going to be matched up leading this Jets passing attack against the Chargers pass defense that's been their Achilles heel, but fortunately for the Chargers, their run defense has been better, and the Giants sold out to stop Breece Hall last week, did an effective job. I have to imagine if Brandon Staley and company have a half a brain, the Chargers will deploy a very similar defensive game plan.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting part to this handicap and the style and the scheme in which Brandon Staley employs, right? Because basically, he's been going with the too high, soft zone look, and your hope is that he sprinkles in a little bit more man coverage, a little more press, and, a couple more guys in the box. Zach Wilson, to me, when I look at him, not great by any stretch, doing a little bit better of a job managing the game. If you look at the turnover-worthy play rate, percentage has been cut season over season from 6% to 2.5%. So he's letting these guys kind of hang around in the game. A little bit of a mixed bag in front of them. If you look, the Jets are dead last, 32nd in pass block win rate. More injuries, right, along the offensive line you saw last week. So not getting much help. I'm looking at who the Jets are planning to start tonight. It's a little bit funky, right? Becton at left tackle. I think it's a great sign that he's at least made it to week 9 of the NFL season, but he's playing.
Baby steps to play all 17 games.
Yeah, but the switch to left tackle, he's not playing very well. And then you got Billy Turner, who is likely starting tonight, kind of on the scrap heap. He's been below replacement level the last 2 seasons. Lakeland Tomlinson, he was added to the injury report late in the week with a hamstring injury. He's going to play. Joe Tippmann is under center, missed last week with a quad injury. Max Mitchell will start at right tackle. To this point, a below replacement level player. So I don't really know how much help is going to be had up front. Can those guys protect against Mack and Bosa? It's a tough matchup. In the ground game, can you get any push? Breece Hall hasn't been much of a factor on the ground game this season. You mentioned the Giants selling out, but that O-line is just, 27% of Breece Hall's carries have been stuffed at or behind the line of scrimmage this season, 3rd most of any qualifying running back. You mentioned some of the progress the Chargers defense has made. Some of that is mostly in the run game. 10th in EPA per rush allowed for the full season. Out of the backfield, though, it's kind of where you got to watch Breece Hall. He is a real threat. The Chargers have also had substantial issues stopping running back passes. They've allowed nearly 8.5 yards per reception. Counting stats-wise, bottom 6 in the NFL in both yards and receptions allowed to the running back position, and that's only 7 data points compared to 8 or 9 for other teams. I think this comes down to Staley. How comfortable are you going to allow Zach Wilson to be early in this game? If you let the confidence build, this is going to look completely different. But the Chargers defense is trending up some. You look since week 4, it's kind of pushing towards league average in EPA per play allowed. Theoretically, right, stepping down in class after playing the likes of Dallas and Kansas City. You kind of said something without maybe knowing where this was going to go, but you transitioned us to saying, hey, I'm not really sure about the teams in the middle of the league and the variance within that. And then all of a sudden, we have the Chargers and the Jets, but the market is saying the exact same thing. So what I have seen is a battle on this game. Some very sharp money early in the week on the Chargers. Then all of a sudden, what I would classify as sharper money taking the Jets plus 3.5 yesterday. And then as soon as that caused the market to dip to like 3.1, 3.2, saw a very sharp money line order come in on the Chargers. So there's a battle on this game, right? Some of the sharp guys laid a cheap-ish money line with the Chargers. Others have come back on the Jets plus 3.5. So it just kind of comes full circle to exactly what you were saying as you kind of led us and transitioned into Monday Night Football.
Just in the last 15 minutes, one of the sharpest shops offshore that we normally use as an indicator, we've seen the Chargers go from a 3.5-point road favorite flat out to 3.5 minus 20, and immediately at that price tag, when you could get the Jets at plus 3.5 even, some dog money coming back in, while a couple of the more prominent shops out here in Vegas all across the board with 3.5 even, 3.5 minus 0.5. I'm very curious to see where this number settles and how all of this plays itself out. But hey, look, the Chargers are a different team on the road than they are at home. If they can get a win here, they have a massive cross-conference showdown next week where they'll welcome in a very well-rested Detroit Lions team, which may end up feeling like a Lions home game, as it so often does at SoFi Stadium. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. Anything you would like to share with our loyal listenership, Payne, before we take a 48-hour break and resume the college football program on Wednesday with our beloved Brad Powers?
No, that is it. Let's get to Wednesday. That's been a little bit more comfy of the football leagues this year for us is college football. So good to be back on Wednesday with Brad chatting some college ball, and then NFL Week 10, sir. Thursday, our nemesis, and a ugly board again.
There is still time to flip the script and conquer the nemesis as we reach the halfway point. We'll just have to make those halftime adjustments like a Lou Anarumo defense and come out with our best on full display to try and get us to Week 18. Best of luck to all of you, our loyal listeners, for wherever your wagering efforts take you this evening between the Jets and Chargers. And hopefully, regardless of where you land, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.